Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton. Every week, bringing us a guest that I have a conversation with and that you join in on as a listener. This guest is a highly qualified business communication expert. And by listening to them and by implementing their recommendations, their strategies, and their tips, we know that we're going to improve our management, our sales, our teamwork, our customer service, and very importantly, our profits. Wonderful privilege today to host Dianna Booher. Dianna is a Hall of Fame keynote speaker, lives near Dallas, Dallas-Fort Worth area in Colleyville, Texas, works from there. Good thing she lives near a major airport because she gives presentations all over the U.S. and all over the world. Her book is going to be available June 18, and in a minute you'll see a copy of that book. Title is Faster, Fewer, Better Emails. And I like the subtitle, Manage the Volume, Reduce the Stress, Love the Results. You'll be interested in knowing that this is Dianna's 48th book. Hey, if you don't have a library, build your own library. That's what she's done. And her books, amazingly, are published in 60 languages. She's an expert in leadership communication and executive presence. And the Biz Communication Show is by no means the only place she's been interviewed. She's been interviewed by every major network and by every major publication as well. It's a pleasure and it's a privilege for both you and me to welcome Dianna Booher. Hello, Dianna.
Hello. Great to be with you, Bill.
Great to have you here. Now, I'm going to tell you before we get into the questions, Dianna, of course, we're going to talk about 20 minutes, but I need you to know that, I may have to leave this and check my emails 2 or 3 or 4 times during 20 minutes. Would that be okay, wouldn't it?
Oh, don't do that to me, Bill.
Is that one of the patterns that you try to get people away from?
Absolutely it is. We found when we did this big survey as a basis for the book that actually more than half people do that. They just leave their email open and they check it all the time. It's like they're babysitting their email.
And as a result of that, they're not doing other things that need to be done.
Right. It's become a major distraction. It's not that it takes a lot of time to read some of those emails. They're one word or, one sentence, but it's just something. It's like popcorn popping into your box and it breaks your concentration on your core work. In fact, I did an article, or I was being interviewed for an article for Newsday, and the reporter had just come from interviewing a CEO of another company, and he said, I've got about an hour and a half's work left for this afternoon between me and going home. But he said, actually, it's going to take me probably the rest of the afternoon because of email popping in and popping in and popping in. So that's what I mean about being a distraction.
In your book, you talk about the average time that many professionals spend on email per day. What was the average that you discovered?
Overall, different studies have said the average person spends 2.5 hours, but we found that 42% spend 3 or more hours. So that's a lot of people spending 3 or more hours a day on their email.
Well, one of the things I liked in your book, I liked many things about it, but one of the things I liked was that you showed the economic cost of that to an organization. Give us an example of that.
Well, let's say somebody, and you can obviously as a manager plug in your own cost, but let's say you take a $75,000 person and then you've got a salary for someone and you've got to up that by 1.4 for consideration of the overhead, their benefits, comp, etc. And so time you multiply that out and then multiply that by 2.5 hours a day on email, that adds up. So you can plug in your own salary or the salary of the people that work for you. Let's say you have 10 people working for you, and you can see how much that does cost you if they're spending time on needless email. And we're not saying get rid of email. We're just saying, and let me throw out another number to help you see how much of that's waste. Another number that we came out with or came up with in this survey, 34% of the email that we do, people say is unnecessary, just total clutter. And by email, the way they define that on the survey is that it's irrelevant to them, it's of no interest, or it's redundant. In other words, they got that information already from somebody else. Let's say somebody's announcing a new employee's joining the company, or a new product is coming out and it's going to be ready in 6 months, and somebody else told them that. So it's just multiple emails saying the same thing. So if a third of the email, a third of the email is the same thing, then take that little formula that I was just giving you and saying, if it costs this much for them to write 3 hours a day, and we could deliver, or we could delete a third of it, you could see how much you could reduce your cost.
It seems parallel to me, Dianna, to what we've been discovering about corporate meetings for a long time. My
Exactly.
gosh, I'm sure in all of your consulting, you find that at least a third of the meetings could be eliminated. And we get into what a friend of mine once called the Department of Redundancy department.
Right.
Through emails or through meetings. Yes, we all understand. We get it, that you can't say a message just once and expect somebody got it. However, there's the other extreme that you say it 25 times and, hey, folks, we already got it. Hold up your book for us, Dianna. I guess you have a copy nearby there.
Sure, here it is.
Faster, fewer, better emails. And again, available June 18, right?
June 18th, yes. So it'll be out shortly.
All right, very fine. This is your 48th book, which amazes anyone who hears that. You've written on a variety of communication topics. I've read your books, I've reviewed them. What is it that prompted you to spend such time and such research on the topic of email?
Well, actually, several things, because I have written on writing in general and communication a lot. But my mom, who was 85 at the time, was over at my house for dinner one night. And I said, well, what's your hurry? Why are you leaving? And I said, can't you stay a little bit longer? And she says, no, I've got to go home and do email. I thought that's ridiculous. That she feels like that's a stressor in her life, that she has to go home and do email. But then I began to hear from clients who frequently were saying, just when we were talking about other things, well, I've got to go back to the office and handle email. We would finish up a class. Maybe I was doing another training class at 5 o'clock, and they'd say, well, I'm going to be up here another 3 hours. I've got to handle email. And it was always just like a chore. And then after I sold my company a couple of years ago, my training company, I began to realize, although, I kept portions of my company, I began to realize I'm spending 2 hours a day on email. Something's changed. I used to be more productive. What am I sliding into? I'm sliding into some bad habits. And so I thought, no, I can't get into these bad habits. And I began to realize it's just this thing creeping over all of corporate America. It's got to be a problem. And I decided to tackle it, do some research, see what other people were doing, and get rid of these bad habits before they started planting roots in my life.
Gee, I wonder if your next book will be about cell phone use.
It should be.
That could be a topic as well. You use the phrase throughout the book, cut the clutter. You've just referred to how much clutter there is in our use of email. What are some of your major tips and strategies about how we can cut the clutter, Dianna?
Well, of course, the obvious one is just to get off distribution list for things that we no longer need. I mean, they had a useful purpose at one point, but roles change, jobs change, your interests change. And I know why people don't do that, even though it's common sense, is because it's quicker when you're overloaded, you're overwhelmed, to just hit delete, just get rid of it now. I got to go on and move ahead. It takes 4 or 5 clicks to get off distribution list. You've got to roll down to the bottom. You got to find that tiny, tiny print for the unsubscribe. And then something pops up and says, why are you unsubscribing? Then you got to hit the confirm the unsubscribe. And that takes longer. It takes, 6 seconds or 7 seconds. So it's quicker to just delete. But they keep coming and coming and coming and coming. So you've got to spend the 6 or 7 seconds to delete what you no longer need. Also, another strategy is to learn how to focus and write a better email to begin with. One of the things that people have been trained since school days to do is to write once upon a time emails. And so you've got to learn to put your message in the first sentence, the first paragraph, summarize well, so that people don't have to read to the bottom to find the essential message and the action that they're supposed to take.
That goes back to what my English teacher taught me in 7th grade. You've got to have a theme sentence to start with.
Yes. What is your point? And not just leave it at that. What action do you want? And make sure they get the action. A lot of people are still writing those so what emails. You read to the bottom, you think, so what? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to send you, etc. So writing better emails. Also, we're still using a lot of email for a lot of things email was never intended to do.
What would be some examples?
Well, to schedule things, for example, back in the mid-90s when we first started, email was for everything. I mean, literally, we used it for everything. It was like the shiny new toy. But now, what happens? Somebody says, do you have some time? I'd like to get with you to talk about such and such. And then there's the reply. Yeah, I've got some time on Friday. And then person, well, I can't actually meet on Friday because I got a doctor's appointment. Oh, well, how about Thursday? Well, no, Thursday. Well, Thursday could work. And before you know it, you've got 6 interactions back and forth. When you could just, if you're on Microsoft, you could just use Cortana and say, find an open schedule and an open spot, and let Cortana, the virtual assistant, schedule it.
So there are other tools that we can use.
Other tools, project management tools. There's all kind of tools like Slack or Basecamp or Asana or whatever. That's one strategy. You could also, there are a lot of emails written just, to cover your bases, to pass on, praises or kudos for yourself. A client praises you about something and with the pretense of congratulating your staff, you're really congratulating yourself.
Hey, this is sort of an online selfie, I guess.
Yeah, right. Or to embarrass other people, or to pressure other people. Like, we're going to be passing on this award or doing some kind of goodwill collection or donation. I want to make sure we thank everybody. Look at the attached list of those who donated, and make sure if you donated to this cause, your name is on this list because it's going to go on the flyer. And of course, pressure to donate. There are all kinds of odd ways that people use email to just, like I said, to clutter.
So it seems to me what you're suggesting is that we need to narrow our focus and make sure that what we're sending is relevant to what needs to get done in the organization.
Right. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be the right tools. It needs to be sent to the right audience. And those minor interactions, the use of reply all is another one that is used inappropriately many times. Reply all should be for the exception, not the rule. And the person who sends it should be responsible to use it credibly and appropriately, not the people that are actually responding and cluttering up everybody's box. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say you're the manager and you're about to send out a report, and you're saying, and you're sending it to your team of 10 people, and you say, would you read the attached report I'll be sending it up, quarterly report at the end of the week. I'd like for you to read it. If you see anything to add, delete, or modify, let me know. Well, 10 people are going to respond and say, looks great, fine, no changes, it's okay with me, etc. That clutters up 10 boxes. Those are all meaningless responses. So what the writer should do, if they're using reply all appropriately, is to say, I've attached such and such reports going out at the end of the week. If you have something to add or delete or modify, reply to me directly. Otherwise, no action's necessary. And that way you're only going to get meaningful comments. If there's nothing meaningful to change, add, You don't need to do anything to it.
Yeah, reply to all fits that that clutter bit you're talking about, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, yes.
Diana, I think it's very important for us to make a distinction between when we should use email and when we should go see the individual face to face. What would be a couple of guidelines you'd give us on that?
Well, there are many occasions that you make a distinction there. They're not interchangeable decisions, but I think one that's important is when you are trying to communicate something that's very complex. You want to send an email because people need to go back and refer to it. They need to look at those directions or those technical explanations over and over to let it sink in. Another use for it, I think, is if you know that the end user, the person you're writing to, is not going to be the doer of some action. They're going to actually delegate it to somebody else. And things get garbled, when you tell it to the next person who tells it to the next person who tells it to the next person. It's far better to put it in writing so they can just pass your directions on in writing, because you can explain your case or your directions or build a persuasive case and let them pass it on better than you can make the case to one person and then they in turn have to write up that direction or give that delegation. And maybe one more that most people don't think about, a reason for writing, is when you're trying to persuade someone to change their mind and they're dead set against it. Now, many people would be tempted to go in and explain this face to face. But many times, if you put it in writing, you give them a chance to think it over and think of a face-saving reason to change their mind. In other words, if you just hit them cold, face to face, they're typically going to push back. Well, no, because it's just a defense mechanism. But if you give them a chance in private to read your email, mull it over, and think, they're right. They're right. I've got to think of a reason, though, to change my mind. They can write back to you 3 days later and say, and you have some information that I wasn't privy to a couple of weeks ago when that decision was made. And now that I have that information, I tend to agree with you. So that's another.
So you use email, the written part, to prepare them, and to sort of set the scene for the in-person conversation.
Yes, yes.
And
yes.
One of the things we cannot get by without noting is the way we cannot be sure exactly how an email is going to be interpreted. I bet you have hundreds of examples of that. One I remember when I was in management, I emailed a colleague and I very simply, I thought, and very politely said, since I wasn't able to reach you by phone, I'll try email instead. And about an hour later, I got this real hot email back, which said, I'm always available by phone. What are you implying? That I didn't answer the phone, that I didn't return your message? And of course, I had no intent like that at all. It's good for us to be aware that our intent can be misunderstood, and sometimes it's nobody's fault.
Absolutely. I had a couple of situations that come to mind. One was very similar to yours in that two people at one of my clients that were trying to get in touch to pass off information. He kept saying, I'll be up to the 7th floor at 3:00 and get this contract from you. And then they would miss each other and they kept missing each other. So he said, at 3:00, I'm going to be up there to pick up the contract. He goes up at 3:00. She's not at her desk. So he sits down to her computer, which she had not locked, and just typed her little note, left it on the screen that says, some people have to work around here. He was just laughing because they knew each other. He came in the next morning. He had an irate message, said, I have you to know my son was injured in a football accident yesterday. It was an emergency. And she was very upset. And he, of course, meant it in a humorous way. So that was very similar to yours. But here's another one that it actually involved fraud. Was a situation involving us with a large mutual fund company. They were not licensed to use one of our programs, but somebody at a lower level did not know that. we get an email in from an administrative assistant who said, we'd like to order another 1,000 copies of such and such book and manual for the upcoming class next week. We're running short and blah, blah, blah. So our office manager said, they're not licensed to teach our program in-house. What's going on here? So once we got that email, of course, we were able to call back, and this person was alerted at that point. Uh-oh, I spilled the beans. We're doing something illegal here. And of course, it became a legal issue. But that innocent email on her part alerted us to a fraudulent action.
Dianna, your book, available June 18, is one that I recommend so highly. I can hardly wait until I can purchase it myself and make both a video and a text review. To me, one of the great assets about your book is that it doesn't take just a don't do this approach, but it says don't do this, but do this instead. You've got many examples in there of the wrong way to do it in email, and then you correct that and show the right way. Anything else you'd like to say about the publication of the book, how to order it, anything else about it?
You can order it at all your online bookstores and in brick and mortar stores as well. It's published by Barrett Kohler. And what I really like about it is the fact that it's based on a massive research project we did with University of Northern Colorado Social Research Lab. So it's based on habits that people currently have and solutions to those habits, to those real problems.
Dianna Booher, I know people will want the book, and also people who have heard and listened to and viewed our conversation will want your contact information. So please share that with us.
Yes, that's BooherResearch.com. And my last name is spelled Booher, like Booher, except I hope they don't.
They won't.
Sure.
Okay, and since you've given your contact information, I'll give mine, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. Invite you to visit my website, check my services for corporations and leaders. My phone number is there, 678-316-4300. Look forward to talking with you. Dianna, any closing comments about all this email biz and your book?
I think the key thing is to manage that email. It's not getting rid of it, but it's managing. If you can't say it in a sentence, you won't be able to write it so that people act on it.
Just again, what my 7th grade teacher said. Okay, Dianna Booher, wonderful to have you with us. All the best in the publication of the book. I know this 48th book is going to have a wide audience, will be published in other languages as your previous books have been, and will be a great help to every reader. Thanks to those of you who have joined us on the Biz Communication Show. Look forward to having you with us again next week, when we will once more talk with a highly competent business communication professional. I'm Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy.